The Survivors is brought to you by our friends at the HelpHUB. This podcast mentions suicide, mental illness, grief, and loss, and may be triggering for some listeners. So please take care of your mental well-being by pausing or skipping any sections that feel uncomfortable to you. And if you or someone you know is struggling, please call 988 for support. See, when you pick up your mug like that right before we start recording, now I have to pick up my two-of-a-kind Survivor mug to make sure that I'm doing what you're doing.
Listen, I had to clean mine, but now that it's clean, I'm going to drink from it.
Okay, well, you drink and I'll talk. So welcome back. If you're a Survivors fan, we're always happy to be back. And I know I'm really glad you're here. I know that she is really glad you're here because she told me a few minutes ago that she was really glad everyone is here. Because we're talking about something that doesn't get enough airtime, I don't think. And it's that really heavy, suffocating feeling of guilt after a suicide loss. And I know we've talked about guilt in certain contexts, but we're going to talk about this in a very specific way today. And I'm coming at it from the perspective of the survivor of loss and the guilt that I have maybe felt. And you're coming at it from an entirely different perspective, which is someone who is an attempt survivor, has had those ideations and didn't talk about it. And the guilt that you might have felt after the fact, feeling like you should have been more open and transparent about how you were feeling. Is that a pretty accurate way of putting it?
100%.
Okay. So what I'm talking about is the whole what if I had walked to the bottom of the stairs that morning guilt and jumped in bed with my dad like I had tried to do, but my mother stopped me. Or why didn't I see the signs sooner? I give myself a lot of grace for that one. And we've talked about that because I was 10 years old. So I didn't know that anything was going on and I couldn't have. So let's talk about it. You know what? I almost want to start with you because I know we've talked about my end of it plenty. I want to talk about your guilt that you might have felt.
Oh, there was a ton of guilt.
Yeah,
a ton. So, for me, I had been contemplating for probably 2 or 3 weeks before Christmas Day rolled around. But when I actually was able to open up to people and let people know what was going on, I felt guilty. But I also felt the same stigma and shame and weakness that I couldn't figure my own shit out. I felt bad that I couldn't open up and tell people what was going on because for me, number one, I didn't understand what was going on in my head. I'd never felt like that way before, and I couldn't put a voice to what it was. As I talked to more and more people the day after Christmas, they were just mad. They were mad that I hadn't opened up. They were mad that I kept all this to myself. But what you have to understand is when you get to that state, you just don't know what to do. You don't. I was terrified, but I also was hurting really bad mentally, and I just couldn't figure out how I could tell anybody what was going on. Because as you and I talk about all the time, there's still so much stigma out there, and there's still a ton of shame. And you run these scenarios through your head of like, I shoulda, coulda, woulda, but didn't. And part of me is, when I had the phone in my hand, I was calling 988. I kept thinking about all the people that I would have left behind, and like all that love and care, and then I felt selfish, and it was really difficult for me to have that conversation with my wife because she was mad. She was really mad at me, but as time wore on, she started to understand that at the time I didn't know how to explain what was going on.
I have a question that I don't think I've ever asked you, and it relates back to what you just said about picking up the phone and talking to a 988 counselor. I don't think I've ever asked you this before. And tell me if you don't want to answer my question. But when you were talking to the counselor, did you consciously talk about your feelings about how people would react? if you completed a suicide? Did you talk about that? Do you mind me asking that?
I think I did. I think the one thing that I remember the most is that they gave voice to what was going on inside of me, because that's the part I didn't understand at all. And I was 59 and a half at the time. I'd lived a pretty long life until I got to that point. And it's hard to answer. It's really hard to answer that because number one, it was 2 years ago. A lot of things have happened since then. But they, I do remember talking about stigma and like feeling weak and feeling shame for even getting to this point. I felt like I should have been able to fix everything because I've been a fixer my entire life, but I couldn't fix myself.
You know what I find to be so interesting is that there's so much focus. Something you just said made me think of this. There's so much focus on, oh, it's weak. It's weak if you can't handle your life. It's weak if you can't manage all your responsibilities. It's weak if you can't show up. All the reasons why we find weakness, or all the places, I should say, where we find weakness. When are we going to start shifting that narrative and flipping it around and saying, it is so strong to pick up the phone and call 988. It is so empowering to express how you feel. It is such a show of resilience and fortitude and all the other words that you wanted to try and find a way through what you were feeling. Like, am I the only one out here who really sees it that way? Like, I see what you did as such an incredible act of, okay, now I'm going to list the words: bravery and self-love and awareness and strength. Like, I could keep going, but you get the point that I just wish that more people felt that way, because everybody's out there talking about, oh, weakness, weakness, weakness. And that's such bullshit.
I will tell you that, that the one thing that the person on the other end of the phone told me that she was grateful that I picked up the phone and called her. When I went down the stairs and talked to my wife, she was grateful that I had the fortitude to actually pick up the phone. By the time everything came to a head, I was just broken. Broken in ways that I couldn't even describe. And part of me was like, I felt guilt for not being able to realize like why I was feeling the way I was, and not to laugh. It's just, it was a really surreal moment in my life that I don't ever want to relive again. Just don't. But I also learned a lot about myself in a really like short period of time. Like you said, I was brave. I was all these things. My hand was literally shaking when I was talking on that phone. I could barely dial the number. But as I'm dialing the number, all these other thoughts are coming in my head, like, what's the family going to think? What's your wife going to think? What are your friends are going to think? You should be thinking more about them and not about yourself. And yeah, there was a ton of guilt that went into that phone call, and a ton of guilt that went into days and months after that. I still feel guilty. I feel guilty for not opening up. But once again, I didn't know how to explain what was going on because I didn't understand it. And I think a lot of people out there have the same thing because they don't understand what's going on in our heads.
That's the whole nature of being dysregulated. That's what is happening. You're not thinking clearly. Mental illness and depression and anxiety, they hijack our capacity and our ability to think clearly and rationally and make good decisions. So it's not surprising at all that you didn't know what the hell was going on, or how to navigate through it, or how to put a name to any of it, because that's just where you were at. That's where anybody who is in that type of a headspace is at. So it does make perfect sense. And you shouldn't feel guilty for that. Now, and I'm saying this as a friend. I'm saying this as a human. I'm saying this as somebody who spends an awful lot of time listening to people say what you just said on crisis lifelines. And I answer it the same way. I say it's not your fault. You just were dealing with what you were dealing with, which is relative to everybody. Everything is subjective. It depends on who you are and what you're navigating through. But the fact is that you don't know what you don't know, and you can't fault yourself for that.
I was just broken. I
Yeah.
really was just broken. I've also had, like, on the other side of that, so I've had friends that have taken their life and felt that immense guilt of, I should have listened better. I should have paid more attention. I should have called this person. I should have texted them. There's a ton of survivor's guilt that goes into that. And and a lot of that kind of correlated, like, with my own attempt. Should have opened up more.
Yeah. We talk a lot about the losses that I've had, being on the survivor of loss side of all of this. And there are 3 of them that I'm directly impacted by. When my cousin died, who was the very first one, he was 18, I was 9. Like, what did I know? And we were such different ages, and we were really never together unless it was a family thing. So there wasn't that relationship. There wasn't the ability to understand what someone was going through because we were having deep conversations, or I worked with them, or we were close friends. It wasn't like that. So that's not something I have ever felt guilt for. Obviously, great sadness, but not guilt. Then flash forward to my dad, who, for those who don't know, died when I was 10. I was told it was a heart attack, but I found out 35 years later by accident that he had actually taken his life. So I had to kind of rewind. And last week we talked about grieving in reverse, which is exactly what I had to do, which was to grieve every single thing that I had already grieved before all over again through a different lens. And while I gave myself the same amount of grace, most of the same amount of grace that I gave myself when I was 9 losing my cousin, I was 10 losing my dad, who again did not present like he was anyone who had any issues whatsoever, super joyful and full of life and beautiful marriage and such a great dad. So I don't feel that guilt. I feel guilt that I've mentioned before in a more recent episode this season, and I alluded to it when we first started talking. I almost was the one to find him that morning, and it was only because my mom kind of intercepted me when I was about 5 feet away from jumping into bed with my dad, who was, I'm sure, already gone, I think. I didn't jump into bed with him. Instead, I ran back up to the kitchen so I didn't get punished. And I now, as an adult, rethinking that whole thing, have discovered a lot of guilt, thinking, well, shit, what if I had gone into bed? What if I had seen that something was wrong? What if he was still alive? Like, that's the only way I can say it. That's what hits me. I almost fell off the chair in my therapist's office when I said that for the first time, and was like, oh my God, what if he was still alive? The truth is that when somebody dies by suicide, those of us who are left behind feel some sense of responsibility in some way. And the irony is, we're really not responsible. In most cases, we are not responsible. And so why is that? Why do we feel that way? Because suicide is traumatic, because suicide is confusing. Most people, like, you're looking at somebody like my dad or my friend who we lost only a few years ago, it's not expected. Nobody is presenting like there's anything wrong. So when we don't have that why, we start manufacturing one. And it's almost usually at our own expense. Don't you think?
Oh, for sure. There's so much that goes into it. So much.
Yeah. And for those who did notice signs or who did try to help, which wasn't the case with my own personal experience, because we didn't know anybody was sick. That guilt can feel a lot more complicated if, I guess, that there are issues that exist already. So then it becomes the, what else could I have said? What else could I have done? You have to remember that the person who's choosing this, if they've been successful, or even if they aren't successful, the choice they are making is not a choice made in clarity. You're making it in chaos.
Yeah. total chaos.
Right?
Because there's so much going on in your head, right?
Yeah.
And trying to navigate even dialing the phone number. Dialing that number, the hardest thing in the world. It's dialing the number, thinking about all the other stuff that's going on. How are people going to view me if I don't do this, or if I do this? So much.
Yeah. And then too, though, I feel like what you just described is true for a great number of attempt survivors out there. And I also think the same, attempt survivors and those who have been successful. I also think it's fair to say that just as many people are out there who have either tried or succeeded in taking their lives are not thinking in the least bit about the people that they're leaving behind. And it's not for lack of love or lack of concern or lack of wanting to protect. It is because when you're in that suicidal, dysregulated mindset, you're not thinking about a goddamn thing. You're thinking about one thing and one thing only, and that's the pain that you're in that is so insurmountable that you have to do the only thing you can do to make it stop. Struggling with your mental health, feeling lost, overwhelmed, or just alone? Well, you're not. Welcome to the HelpHUB, your online destination for mental health resources, content, and tools to help you navigate whatever mental health challenges you are facing in the moment. At the HelpHUB, we offer individualized resources tailored to your unique needs and community, with over 16 different categories to find exactly the kind of personalized help you need when you need it most. Because even though we all deal with many of the same challenges, we don't always experience those challenges the same way. So whether you're looking for crisis support, downloadable resources, or an extensive archive of mental health-related articles and videos, we've got you. From episodes of the Survivors podcast for suicide loss survivors and lived experience blogs to interactive tools and professional connections, the HelpHUB meets you where you are and helps you move forward with strength and support. Remember, you don't have to do this alone. Visit thehelphub.co today.
So much truth to that. It's a terrifying place to be. And 8 million things going through your mind and like you said, not about the normal everyday stuff, but it's more personal. It's more, trying to find the word. Thinking, give me a second. It's going to
take all the time. We got all day. We're here all week.
Because I'm old. I don't remember things. It was a thought process that I never really had before. I hadn't taken the time to think about all these other things. And then at crunch time, I liken it to somebody that actually sees their life flash before their eyes. That's what I saw.
That's interesting. I don't think you've ever said that to me.
Yeah, it's hard to explain, but it's like if you think about if you're about to be in a really bad accident, you see it coming, you can't stop it. That's how I felt.
Okay, that's fair. And I can only imagine most people who are listening to this can identify with that. Like we've all had the near miss, and we've all done the white knuckle thing on the steering wheel, and the heart goes a million miles an hour. And I get it. Yeah, I understand. That's a good way of putting it. So now we've talked all about different perspectives on guilt. How do we reframe it? What are the tools that we can use to reframe it? And I can speak for myself and others that I've worked with just in terms of crisis counseling, that help you untangle from that guilt. I'm curious what you think, because I know this first one is something that you have either done. I've done it, but I think you've done it, writing a letter.
Oh, yes.
To the person who you lost, saying all the things that you wished you could say but didn't get a chance to say. And so that's the whole bleeding the radiator perspective. It's get everything that's filling you up and making you want to blow out. Get it out into a safe place so that the pressure is relieved.
Well, I have a different perspective to that. So I wrote a letter to myself, to my past self, to myself that was there that day, to show them how far we've come. And it opened a lot of doors, and it opened my eyes to some things that I could have done better.
Love that you did that. I don't think you've told me that either. Do we ever talk, you and I?
There's a lot of like things like I keep to myself
Yeah.
because it's just my way of like dealing with all the sadness, and there's some grief, and there's a whole bunch of just really second guessing myself. But when I did that, it made me realize that maybe if I just opened my mouth just a tiny bit, I wouldn't have felt so guilty. If I had let on that I wasn't doing okay, instead of my great, awesome extroverted mask, which is great, it really is. But when you're depressed, it is not the best thing to have. Like, I wish I had taken my mask off sooner rather than later because I paid the price.
Yeah. Well,
So I'm the one who really suffered.
right. And thankfully for all of us who have you in our lives, you figured it out. And now you're sitting in a position of being able to either remind or encourage other people to do the same thing. And that's a powerful place to sit. So as far as other tools, we want to not only talk about the problem or the issue, we want to talk about how to fix it or how to work through it. Have you ever heard of this concept, fact checking your guilt? Have you ever heard of that?
No.
So, okay, fact check your guilt. Ask yourself, is the thing that I feel guilty about something that I really truly had control over? If the answer is no, the guilt belongs to that grief and not to you.
That's an interesting concept.
Isn't it?
I think the other thing people can do too is like journal.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Journaling about your grief and your anger and just all those things, that helps a lot. It did for me, and I wasn't a big writer until all the shit went down. But super helpful even with me writing my book because I went back through the journal and everything that was a negative and just didn't have any value, I rolled it up into a little ball and I threw it away. And if it was fire season, it would have gone in the fire pit. But that helped me also because guilt sucks and it eats you alive.
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. But talking about it or writing about it helps you process it. It also helps you when you get it from that place of being lodged in your brain and in that quiet, isolated space in your head, and you start saying it out loud. Even sometimes saying something out loud, you'll be like, oh, that's dumb. Why am I holding myself accountable for that? Or why am I giving myself grief over that thing? Once you breathe life into it, you realize that it really doesn't have the power that you thought that it had. So, and honestly, that's why. So there's another tool, and this leads into the other tool. That's why it's so incredibly powerful. The tool of talking to other, not just people, talking to other survivors. In your case, it would be a survivor of someone who was ideating or had an attempt. Or for me, it would be talking to people who have lost other people that they love to suicide. And just hearing somebody say, I feel that too, or I did that too, or I said that too, makes such a world of difference. Because as someone who has not made an attempt, I can sit here and listen to you all day long, and I can feel for you and I can sympathize with you, but I can't empathize with you because I don't feel that same thing that you felt. So there is a disconnect. I can be as supportive as I can be, but it doesn't change the fact that I haven't experienced what you have experienced. But when you talk to somebody else who has, I'm curious, are you then in a place where you're just like comforted by that?
I am.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
and it comforts them too, because now it all goes back to sharing your story. Every time you share your story, you unlock somebody else's prison. But now they don't feel so alone, and they felt seen and felt heard, and that's how I feel. I felt seen and feel heard. And there's so many different reasons why people have suicidal ideations, but it all boils back down to the messiness in her head and the dysregulation. And in my case, I had a lot of really horrible things happen in a really short period.
Yeah. And that actually is another good segue to the last tool in managing the kinds of guilt that we've been talking about: therapy. Therapy, 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 especially with somebody who understands trauma. So if you're someone experiencing trauma, if you do not already have a trauma-informed therapist, go seek one out, because it is a game changer. It can be incredibly powerful in helping you to reframe feelings of guilt, which are really, really hard things to reframe.
It is. And my therapist, I love that girl. She's the third one I'm with, but she's the best. And she listens to me. She's not judgmental. But that's the other thing when you're talking. Sometimes when you're talking to friends that just don't get why you got to that place, they can become very judgmental.
Yep.
Here's what happens when you go to therapy. You don't get that judgment. And you can talk about what you're really feeling and how you got to that point in your life. And thankfully for me, my friends were amazing. Did I lose a few friends because of all that went down? Yeah. But my friends didn't judge. They were just thankful that I'm still here. Like I am. I am
Yep.
thankful I am still here.
Yeah, it's true. So the bottom line to all of this is that guilt after a suicide loss or guilt after a suicide attempt is common. It doesn't mean it's justified. Doesn't mean that you should feel guilty. Doesn't mean you needed to feel guilty. Doesn't mean I need to feel guilty, because you were dysregulated in your attempt. I loved the people that I lost and didn't, in most cases, even know that they were suffering. And what happened on either side wasn't anyone's fault. So there's the remembering that we're not alone in this and we don't have to carry guilt forever. That's a big realization. You don't have to carry it. It is possible to heal, even when those old thoughts creep in. And I think that one of the big takeaways is, if the thoughts creep in, let them creep. Let them creep. Guilt is normal. It's normal. It's often misplaced. Okay, sure. And it is an absolutely appropriate response to a suicide loss. But just because you feel responsible or you feel guilty doesn't mean you are responsible or you are guilty. So give yourself grace.
Patience and grace, it goes a long way.
We're doing the best we can at surviving. Am I right?
Amen, sister.
Right
Amen.
on, baby. Hey, thanks for going deep.
You're welcome.
I love you.
I love you. I'll see you next week.
Yes, you will.
Thanks for joining us on The Survivors. Remember, no matter how tough things feel, you are enough, and the world needs you just the way you are. You're not alone in this journey. There's a community here, and every step forward counts. We're so grateful you took the time to listen, and we hope you'll take one day at a time. Just know there's always more light ahead.
Thanks for being here, friends. Just remember, help is out there in so many different places. So if you or someone you know is struggling, please call 988 and a trained crisis counselor like me will be there to help. You can also find an inclusive and comprehensive directory of mental health resources, tools, and content at thehelphub.co. Just remember that help is always just a call or a click away. We'll catch you next week. In the meantime, keep surviving.